friends. Today is Monday, March 23rd, and it's day 5 of missing my students. And it's also my daughter-in-law's birthday, Stephanie. So happy birthday, Stephanie. All right. Well, we are going to continue on with Henry and Ribsy by Beverly Cleary. And I do want to reiterate that I do not own any rights to any of the books I am reading. I'm just doing this because this is my only way to keep reading to my students. All right, chapter 5, Ramona and the P.T.A. This is one of my favorite chapters. Henry Huggins and Scooter McCarthy were riding home on their bicycles one day after school, early in September. Ribsy, who always waited for Henry under the fir tree in the schoolyard, was riding in a box Henry had tied to the back fender of his bike. You going salmon fishing this weekend? Asked Scooter, steering his bicycle through a pile of autumn leaves in the gutter. I don't know. Dad hasn't said anything about it, answered Henry. My dad took me down the Tucka River last Saturday, said Scooter. Catch anything? Asked Henry, trying to keep his excitement out of his voice. If salmon were biting on the Tucka, maybe his father would go fishing next Saturday. Well, I didn't exactly catch anything, said Scooter. Well, how do you mean not exactly? Henry asked. Oh, I thought I had a bite once, but I didn't exactly land the fish, said Scooter. But I bet I get one next time. The two boys pedaled along Klickitat Street. Henry was hoping his father would go fishing on Saturday. He would almost surely get to go, because he had kept Ribsy out of trouble, at least the kind of trouble the neighbors might complain about. Of course, there had been a couple of close calls, but Henry had lived up to his side of the bargain, and now he had nothing to worry about. So long, called Scooter when the boys came to the Huggins' house. So long. Henry rode up the driveway and parked his bicycle in the garage. The back door was locked, so he found the key under the doormat and let himself in. Beside the refrigerator, he found a note from his mom that said, Have gone to P.T.A. meeting. Don't eat all the hot dogs. Love, Mother. Henry took 2 hot dogs, which he shared with Ribsy. While Henry was eating his hot dog and thinking about catching a salmon, the doorbell rang. When Henry went to the door, he found Beezus and her little sister Ramona standing on the front porch licking ice cream cones. Ramona, who carried a square blue lunchbox in one hand, was having trouble managing her cone with the other. Her chin and the bib of her overalls were smeared with chocolate ice cream. Hello, Henry, said Beezus. Can you come over to my house and play checkers? Sure, that's a keen idea, answered Henry. Bet I can beat you. Checkers was one of his favorite games, and Beezus was a good player. She didn't take all day and make a move the way some girls did. Ribsy looked hungrily at that ice cream cone. He knew Henry always saved the last bite of a cone for him. Maybe the girls would give him a bite too. Ribsy swallowed and wagged his tail. Go away, Henry said to him. You can't have any of their ice cream. Ribsy made a whimpering noise. What's Ramona carrying a lunchbox for? Henry asked. She doesn't go to school. It's not a lunchbox, said Ramona as a little river of ice cream dribbled off her chin. It is too a lunchbox, said Henry. Beezus ran her tongue all the way around her ice cream cone. Ramona's pretending it's a camera, she explained. Huh, how can she pretend a lunchbox is a camera? Henry wanted to know. A lunchbox for a camera? Man, what a dumb idea. Oh, she has lots of imagination, said Beezus. Daddy says she has too much. I'm going to take your picture, announced Ramona. She held one end of the lunchbox against her stomach. The other end she pointed at Henry. Ramona, look out for your ice cream cone, Beezus warned. You're tipping it! That was just what Ribsy was waiting for. With one sweep of his long pink tongue, he knocked Ramona's ice cream cone to the porch, and in 3 greedy licks, the ice cream was gone. Then the cone crunched between his teeth. Ah! Ramona let out a scream of rage.
Ow.
Oh, you're fine.
It's an echoey room.
Shh, look what you've done, you old dog, said Henry crossly. He looked around to see if any of the neighbors were watching. He didn't want people to say he had a dog that stole ice cream from little children. And here's the picture. I was wondering if the neighbors were. Maybe I shouldn't scream so loudly. Ribsy gave the porch a couple of licks to make sure he had not missed any ice cream. Ramona stopped screaming and then started to hit Ribsy with her lunchbox. Beezus grabbed her little sister with one hand and held her own cone out of Ribsy's reach with the other. "I told you to be careful," she scolded. "I want my ice cream cone!" howled Ramona. "Well, it's gone now," said Beezus. Looking guilty, Ribsy slunk down the steps. He turned his back to Henry and the girls and began to gnaw an old bone in the corner of his yard. "I want my ice cream cone!" shrieked Ramona. "Well, you can't have mine. I licked it all the way around." Beezus bit off the top of her cone and sucked out the melting ice cream. "Anyway, you were getting most of yours on your chin." "I was not," howled Ramona. "Oh, I'll buy her another one," said Henry. Anything to keep Ramona so he and Beezus, or keep her quiet, so he and Beezus could get started on their checker game. Besides, since his dog had taken the cone, he guessed he really owed her another one. "Now?" With her grubby fist, Ramona scrubbed at the tears that had rolled down into the ice cream on her chin. "Oh, all right." Henry decided he might as well get it over with. "Wait a sec." He went into the house where he took a dime out of a marble sack in his dresser drawer. When Henry returned to the porch, he saw Ramona walking across the lawn with her lunchbox in her hand. She stopped, opened the box, and laid it on the grass. Then she ran over to Ribsy, grabbed the bone from between his paws, and put it in her lunchbox. "There!" she said, as she snapped the lunchbox shut. Ribsy looked surprised. "Woof!" he said. "Hey," said Henry, "you can't do that." "Ramona, you give Ribsy his bone this minute," ordered Beezus. "No!" said Ramona. Ribsy sniffed at the lunchbox, and then he looked hopefully at Ramona and wagged his tail. That's a camera," Henry reminded Ramona. "You can't put a bone in a camera." "Well, now it's a lunchbox," said Ramona. "Ramona, give Ribsy his bone," coaxed Beezus. "Whoever heard of carrying a dirty old bone in a lunchbox?" "I have a sandwich in my lunchbox." Ramona was firm. "I'm going to eat it." "Oh, dear. Now she's pretending his bone is a sandwich," said Beezus apologetically. "I don't suppose there's anything we can do about it. Maybe Mother has a bone Ribsy can have." Henry had trouble keeping up with Ramona's thinking. At least she was quiet, and that was something. Ribsy's got lots of old bones buried around. He can dig up another one. Come on, let's go to the store and get her the ice cream cone and get it over with. I want to play checkers. Ribsy, however, did not want another bone. He wanted the one Ramona had snatched. Sniffing at the lunchbox, he trotted at Ramona's heels all the way to Glenwood School, which was across the street from the store, where Henry and Beezus planned to buy the ice cream cone. "Oh, I guess all these cars are parked here because of the P.T.A. meeting," Henry remarked, as they took a shortcut across the playground. "Did your mother go?" "Not this time." Beezus took a Kleenex out of her pocket and tried to scrub some of the chocolate ice cream off Ramona's chin. "Mother said she was too tired after watching Ramona all day." "I want some," announced Ramona. "Some what?" asked Beezus. "Some P.T.A., said Ramona firmly. "You can't have any P.T.A. Henry didn't see how one little girl could have so many dumb ideas. "P.T.A. means the Parent Teacher Association. It's just a bunch of ladies talking. Come on, we'll get you an ice cream cone." Ramona stopped by the jungle gym on the playground. "I want some P.T.A., she shrieked. And here, by the way, is a picture of Ribsy following Ramona, trying to get his bone back. "But Ramona," protested Beezus, "how can you have any P.T.A.? Like Henry said, it's just a bunch of ladies talking in the school auditorium and the 7th grade singing some songs for them." "It is not," sobbed Ramona. "I want some now." What is she talking about anyway? Henry was disgusted. All he wanted was a game of checkers, and now it looked as if he had to stand around all afternoon arguing with a little kid about the P.T.A. "I don't know what she means." Beezus sounded worried. "Come on, Ramona." Still clutching the lunchbox, Ramona threw her arms around one of the pipes on the jungle gym and screamed. Ribsy put his paw on the lunchbox. Ramona snatched it away from him. "Go away!" she cried. "I want some P.T.A.! Ribsy gave a short bark. "I like P.T.A.!" sobbed Ramona, and with her lunchbox in one hand, she began to climb the jungle gym to get out of Ribsy's reach. You've got to find out, Henry told Beezus. If you don't, she'll just sit there and yell. I know it. Beezus sounded tired. What do you want to do with the P.T.A., Ramona? Eat it! Shrieked Ramona as she climbed higher on the jungle gym. Ugh, how can you eat P.T.A.? I told you, P.T.A. was just a bunch of ladies talking. Henry kicked at a pebble in disgust. Wait a minute. I know what she means, exclaimed Beezus. She thinks we're spelling something in front of her. What do you mean? Asked Henry. Well, at home, when we talk about something to eat that she's not supposed to have, we spell it. Here, Beezus lowered her voice to a whisper, like C-O-K-E and C-A-N-D-Y. She thinks we're spelling something we don't want her to have. That's why she wants it. Oh, for Pete's sake. Leave it to Ramona. Henry could see he was not going to get to play checkers that day. Well, now what are we going to do? Beezus kept her voice to a whisper. Let's go across the street to the store and get her some cookies or something and tell her it's P.T.A. Hey, that's a good idea. Henry thought for a girl, Beezus was pretty sensible. Ribsy started to follow Henry and Beezus to the store, and then he looked back at Ramona, sobbing on the jungle gym, with the lunchbox still in her hand, and decided to stay near his bone. Henry didn't call Ribsy because he knew dogs were not allowed in food stores. Henry and Beezus looked around the store for something that cost a dime that they could tell Ramona was P.T.A. This was not easy to do because Ramona was familiar with cookies, popsicles, and peanuts. They finally decided on a small bag of potato chips because Beezus was sure Ramona did not know potato chips by name and because they wouldn't drip. When Henry and Beezus started back to the school grounds, they saw that Ribsy had his paws on the first rung of the jungle gym. Woof, he said, and looked hungrily at his lunchbox. Henry also noticed two women looking at Ribsy and Ramona. One of the women was Mrs. Weiser, a friend of his mother's. Do you guys remember Mrs. Weiser? And we've seen her in other books where Ramona showed her slug and she's all, oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's Mrs. Weiser. She pointed to Ribsy and then to Ramona. Ugh, now what, thought Henry, hurrying across the street. He hoped Ribsy wasn't in trouble, not just before the fishing trip. Mrs. Weiser was saying, look at that poor little thing. She is frightened out of her wits. I think it's simply outrageous the way dogs are allowed to run loose in a schoolyard, said the other woman. I wonder if we dare try to pull him away so she can climb down. Oh, I'd be afraid to go near him, said Mrs. Weiser. I know that dog. He belongs to the Huggins boy, and I understand he's dangerous. He bit the garbage man a week or so ago. Did he really bite the garbage man? Do you guys remember? No, he did not. The Huggins boy looked at Beezus and sighed. Man, all he wanted was to play checkers. Just one little old game of checkers, and now look what had happened. How was he ever going to explain to Mrs. Weiser? And now that Mrs. Weiser thought Ribsy had chased Ramona up on the jungle gym, she would tell everybody what a dangerous dog he was, and that meant more trouble. Probably meant his father would not take him fishing. Come on, Beezus, said Henry. Let's try to tell her. Oh, there you are, Henry Huggins, said Mrs. Weiser. Does your mother know your dog is loose on the school grounds? No, Mrs. Weiser, said Henry. I thought she didn't, interrupted Mrs. Weiser. My little sister is not afraid of the dog, said Beezus quickly. Ramona, who had stopped crying to listen, let out a howl. Ah! Mrs. Weiser and the other woman looked at each other and nodded. Mm-hmm. Woof, said Ribsy again. Henry, you hold your dog, and I'll try to get her down, said Mrs. Weiser. Henry took hold of Ribsy's collar. He wondered if Mrs. Weiser was going to climb the jungle gym. He hoped so. But she's got, he started to say. Don't be frightened, dear, Mrs. Weiser called to Ramona. We won't let that bad doggie hurt you. Yes, come on down, sweetheart, coaxed the other woman. Just then, the 7th grade burst out of the school building. Several boys began to play a noisy game of catch. Ribsy barked excitedly. Hi, we've been singing for the P.T.A., said one of the boys as he ran past Henry. I want some P.T.A., howled Ramona. Ribsy grew more excited. He strained at his collar and managed to get his paws on the lower rung of the jungle gym again. This is outrageous, said Mrs. Weiser. I'm going to report this dog to the principal. But she's got his bone, said Henry desperately. Ramona and Ribsy and the boys playing catch made so much noise that the two women did not even hear Henry. I think the principal should call the pound and have this dog taken away, remarked a second woman as Mrs. Weiser started toward the building. But he has a license, protested Henry, wishing Ribsy would not bark so much. Hey, what's the old garbage hound up to now? One of the boys shouted as he ran off to play catch. Be quiet! Henry yelled after that boy, who was a friend of Scooter's, and he isn't a garbage hound. The doors of the school opened, and the mothers who had attended the P.T.A. meeting poured out of the building. There was such a crowd that Mrs. Weiser was unable to enter. Quick, get her down, Henry begged Beezus. If only they could get Ramona down and go home before Mrs. Weiser got back. Ramona, here's your P.T.A., said Beezus, waving the bag of potato chips. Come on down and get it. No, said Ramona. Ramona Geraldine Quimby, you come down this instant, ordered Beezus. You come down or you can't have any P.T.A. Can't you climb up and get her? Henry was desperate. What if Miss Mullen, the principal, really did call the pound? Beezus started up the jungle gym. You just wait, Ramona. I'm going to tell Mother on you. Ramona began to shriek all over again. This excited Ribsy, who barked even harder than ever, and attracted the attention of some of the mothers who walked over to the jungle gym to see what the commotion was all about. Quiet, Ribsy, ordered Henry. Can't you see the trouble you're getting into? How can I get her down? Beezus asked. I can't carry her down, and if I pry her loose, she's going to fall. Oh, that little girl's afraid of the dog, one of the mothers said. No, she isn't. Henry spoke up, but no one paid any attention to him. They were all looking at Ramona. Oh, she's so frightened she's crying, someone said. Look at her little face all streaked with tears. And chocolate ice cream, thought Henry. Oh, I think it's a shame a little girl cannot play on the school grounds without being annoyed by a dog, said another mother. My dog isn't annoying her, she's annoying him. Henry tried to explain the situation to the mother nearest him, but she looked at him as if she did not believe he was telling the truth. Maybe we should discuss this at the next P.T.A. meeting, someone suggested. Next meeting? We'd better do something now, said another mother. It's the Huggins dog. One of my neighbors says she has a terrible time with him because he sits and waits for her cat to come out of the house so he can chase it up a tree. Henry wished he and Ribsy could just disappear. Now all the mothers in the whole school would think Ribsy was awful. Do you think we should call the police? One of them asked. Oh, I wouldn't do that, said one of the mothers. I know that little Ramona Quimby. She's a perfect terror. Henry felt better. At least he had one friend in the crowd. Well, really, said another mother, just because the poor little thing is too young to have established acceptable behavior patterns doesn't mean we can let her be terrified by that dog. Henry did not know what that lady meant, but he felt it did not sound very good for Ribsy. I think we should call the pound, somebody said. You can see how frightened she is. Why, Henry? It was Mrs. Huggins. What on earth is happening? His dog chased that little girl up the jungle gym and won't let her come down, said one woman, before Henry could even open his mouth. Mrs. Huggins glanced at Ramona and then looked sympathetically at Henry. You know, he's not a vicious dog, she told the woman. Mom, he didn't chase her, honest, said Henry. Then Mrs. Weiser, followed by Miss Mullen, the principal, pushed her way through the crowd of mothers. There's the dog, Mrs. Weiser said, pointing at Ribsy. Miss Mullen? Thought Henry. Now I suppose I'll really catch it. Miss Mullen was nice, but when she said something, she meant it. Miss Mullen was tall and gray-haired. When she spoke, other people listened. Hello, Henry. What's the trouble? She asked pleasantly. The other women stopped talking. Feeling uneasy, Henry looked around at all the mothers. He licked his lips and began, Well, it looks like my dog chased Ramona up the jungle gym, but he didn't really. Henry gulped and went on. She took his bone away from him and put it in her lunchbox, and he just wants his bone back, that's all. Henry decided it was not necessary to tell about the ice cream cone. Oh my Grady, here's the whole giant picture. You can see Ramona up there screaming, of course. That's a lot of people. That's right, Miss Mullen, said Beezus from the middle of the jungle gym. I have a sandwich in my lunchbox, screamed Ramona. But the child was obviously frightened, said Miss Weiser. She was crying as her little heart would break. She was crying before she climbed up there, said Beezus. I'm sure Ribsy wouldn't hurt anyone, said Miss Mullen. Henry was surprised to learn that the principal knew his dog's name. Miss Mullen smiled. "We all know Ribsy very well at Glenwood School," she said. "He meets Henry under the fir tree every day after school. I've been watching him from my office window for a very long time, and he has never annoyed any of the children. In fact, he's unusually good-natured." Then Miss Mullen looked up at Ramona. "You may come down now," she said, pleasantly but firmly. Ramona scowled, but she climbed down. "Now, give Ribsy his bone," said Miss Mullen. Ramona looked sulky as she unfastened the lunchbox and handed Ribsy his bone. He took it in his mouth and looked at Henry as if to say, "Can we go home now?" The crowd of mothers, some looking a little embarrassed, began to drift away. "Thank you, Miss Mullen," said Mrs. Huggins. "Gee, thanks, Miss Mullen," said Henry gratefully. "I didn't know what I was going to do. They were going to send Ribsy to the pound." Miss Mullen smiled. "That's all right, Henry, I understand. I have 3 dogs of my own at home, you know." "You do?" Henry was astounded. Miss Mullen? With 3 dogs? He had never thought of her as having any kind of life outside Glenwood School at all. 3 dogs? As the principal went back into the building, Beezus took a Kleenex out of her pocket and held it to Ramona's nose. "Blow," she said. Ramona blew. "It really wasn't Ribsy's fault," Beezus said to Mrs. Huggins. Henry's mother smiled. "I understand." Then Beezus handed her little sister potato chips. "Here's your P.T.A., she said crossly. "I hope you're satisfied." Mrs. Weiser, however, did not give up easily. "I know you're fond of the dog," she said to Mrs. Huggins, "but he really did frighten the child." And then she squatted down on her heels so that she could look right into Ramona's face. "Did the doggy frighten you, dear?" she asked. "No," said Ramona, staring at Mrs. Weiser, and then she squatted down on her heels, too. Henry thought this made Mrs. Weiser look very silly. Ramona stuffed another potato chip in her mouth and as Mrs. Weiser hastily stood up. "I like P.T.A., announced Ramona. "I just bet you do," said Henry. "Come on, Beezus. If we hurry, maybe we'll have time for 1 game of checkers before dinner." And then, because he knew his fishing trip was safe, Henry began to sing, "Whoopie's dog food is the best." Beezus joined him on the second line, and together they sang, "Contains more meat than all the rest." And here's Mrs. Weiser. Oh my goodness. And that is it for today. Our next chapter is chapter 6, Ribsy Goes Fishing. Not Henry, Ribsy, right? Okay, so I just want to remind you to stay safe, stay at home if you can. Only go out for seriously just milk and stuff. Okay, just be safe, my friends. Keep washing those hands, and I'll check in with you tomorrow. Bye.